It's Gem Day, and we are still here in the midst of these coronavirus Sundays, which means we haven't been able to congregate with our fellowships, but we're still here for each other. We're still being the better people. Now, I want to ask you something here. You ever have a problem with religious people? Right? Like these people, they say they believe, and you'll see them act like a certain way during the year. And then all of a sudden, then they get into this stage where they're all acting all holy. And then it's like, that time of the year now where we're going to study our Bible and we're going to do, and you go, well, you was acting like this here before. And maybe you weren't even doing anything bad, but you were kind of just acting like it wasn't a big deal. And all of a sudden now it's a big deal. Right? They kind of, and you go, well, why is that? And that's always bothered me. It's like, I've always asked myself, well, if you're going to be religious, you should be religious year round, right? But I got thinking on this today, right? I got thinking on, so why is it people do this? And I was reading my Bible here today, and we getting close to Easter, which is the Passover season, right? This is the time we see the story in the Old Testament. The tribes of Israel, they were living in Egypt at the time, okay? And they had been there for like 400 years, and God starts to do a sovereign move. He's going to move them out of Egypt. And at this time, what he has to do is he's going to bring some judgment on the land of Egypt because they're not letting his people go, right? This is the whole story of Moses and everything, okay? So what we see is at this time is God's going to strike down the firstborn, everything in that land, but he's going to get his people out of there, and he gives them something to do. He's going to put the markings on they're going to have them put the markings on their doorpost, and when he sees that, he's going to let them go. But there's some interesting stuff he asks them to do here. And he says, on there, he says, first day, you're going to remove the leaven out of your house. He gives them like a whole week. He says, you're going to start to do some certain things I'm going to tell you for a whole week, and one of those things, you're going to remove all the leaven out of your house, which means that there was leaven in the house, and he wants them to get it out of there. All right. Now it's interesting. Later on in the Bible, we find out leaven really is a symbol of sin. It says it's a symbol for corruption. I think the reason is because it works its way through the bread and everything, and so it's a symbolic thing of how sin and how things God doesn't like can just kind of make their way into our life. And so God says, before I'm going to do this work, I want you to start to move this leaven out of your life. Now, I've got to ask myself here, God tells them to do this every year, forever, which is why the Jewish people still today, they hold this Passover and they will eat unleavened bread. But I want to ask myself, if they got rid of all the leavened bread, all the unleavened stuff, how come there would be leaven back in the house by the end of the next year to get rid of? Right? If God said get rid of it, wouldn't you think that the next year that comes that there would be no unleavened, there'd be no leaven left in the house? Well, and I think this is the point, is that these things, they come back into our lives, right? They sin, all these kind of stuff. We take these times and we get rid of them, but over the time, what happens is they make their way back into our house, into our lives, okay? And we have to take time to move those things on back out again. Right? And God reminds that. God, he's gracious. He understands we're sinners. We're humans. We have desires. We have passions. We're human, right? And he understands that the leaven makes its way back into our lives. Now, it's interesting over here. I'm reading out of Exodus 12 here. Over 26, he says, when the Lord speaks to him, he says, when your children ask you why you're doing this, and I like this word, he goes, and they say, why do we do this service? You're going to tell them the reason for it. But what I really like is he says it's a service. See, it's a time of the year. It's something that we doing before the Lord. I think about all these religious people, and it's like one day they just not so religious, and the next day they're like all holier than thou. Well, why is that? And I'm looking at this and because God calls us to times of service. He calls us to times to do that. He calls us times to get a little bit religious and to look on the inside, right? And to get rid of these things. Here's my message for you. We are stuck in the house. And now we've been stuck in the house for weeks here with this whole coronavirus thing, right? Spend the time. Do some spring cleaning, right? Spend some time. Maybe spend a little service to the Lord. Look at yourself and say, hey, what do I need to get out of my life? What's the leaven that's in my life? I'm going to tell you, this morning I woke up, the Lord started speaking to my mind about idols, right? What are the idols in my life that I have? Because there's all sorts of things. Hey, I won't get married like anyone else. I want some intimacy. I want purpose, and I want fun. And what I find is that these things, they start to cause some emotional turmoil towards me. And the Lord speaks. He goes, maybe that you holding these things up a little bit more than you should, and that's why it's causing you consternation. Maybe for you, Jim, the thing I'm speaking to, maybe you got some idols in your life. Maybe this is a little bit of leaven that's made it in. Maybe, Jim, spend a little bit of time here while you're forced to be at home. Spend a little time cleaning the leaven out of your place. See, I don't want to be this ultra-religious man that's all the time acting as if I'm something I'm not, but I certainly want to be open to the times when God's telling me to, hey, set some time aside and give me some service. All right. I'm going to encourage you guys to do the same thing. You clean your house at springtime, maybe spend a little bit of time asking the Lord, what's the leaven in your heart? All right. That makes us the better people. I'm loving on you. You hang in there. We're going to get through this. This ain't going to last forever. All right. Our lives are in the hands of the most sovereign Lord. All right. We're going to leave it here, and you have a great day. This is Jim Day.